People think revenge is loud, screaming matches, legal battles, broken glass in the parking lot. But mine? Mine was silent, elegant, and coded line by line into the heartbeat of a company that never truly saw me coming. My name is Jenna Rourke. I am 38 years old, born and raised just outside of Denver, Colorado. I am a systems architect by trade, a problem solver by nature, and for 6 long years, I was the invisible backbone of a company called Veridian Nexus. If you have never heard of them, that is exactly the point. They provide backend automation services for logistics companies. Think data flows, billing processes, digital supply chains. It is the kind of work that keeps other businesses running while no one notices the people behind the curtain. I used to think that was noble. Now I just think it is dangerous. When I joined Veridian, the entire operation ran on panic and spreadsheets. No joke. Managers would stay up until 2 a.m. just to balance ticket assignments. HR tracked time-off requests on color-coded tabs. Clients emailed directly to get updates on their support cases. I thought I had walked into a startup stuck in 2004, but I saw opportunity in that mess. Within my first month, I started sketching a roadmap for automation, a centralized dashboard for task management, auto-escalation for service requests, and a payroll bot that could process and verify entries without a single human hand. All of it designed to flow seamlessly. Clean code, smart triggers, nothing flashy, just pure efficiency. Over time, I built a framework that became the nervous system of the company. It was not just a few helpful tools. It was a full automation suite I nicknamed Flow Core. After 3 years, Flow Core was running 92% of our back-end tasks. Let that number sink in, 92%. The human workload had dropped to a fraction of what it used to be. I had cut hundreds of redundant hours out of the system, slashed vendor error rates, and streamlined client ticket turnaround by nearly 48%. On paper, I had saved the company over $3.1 million per year. That is not a vanity figure. It came straight from an internal audit report, but I was never credited by name. People in the office just assumed the tools were magically upgraded by the team. No one ever asked who built the bots, maintained the logic trees, or updated the triggers during holiday weekends. My manager, Brad Keller, certainly never brought it up during meetings. He was the kind of guy who treated automation like office coffee, nice to have but not worth thinking about. The truth is, Brad had no clue how any of it actually worked. He liked to present my updates to upper management as if they were team wins. I kept quiet. I was not in it for applause. I was in it to create systems that could outlast me. But I would be lying if I said the silence did not sting. I put in late nights, fixed things on Christmas Eve, pulled their entire billing system back online during a major outage, and never once got a bonus for it. My title stayed the same. My paycheck barely budged. At one point, I trained an intern, Lila, to manage part of the automation monitoring. She looked at the code and said, "You wrote all of this yourself?" I nodded, and she just whispered, "This is beautiful." That meant more to me than anything I ever heard in a staff meeting. What made it all worse was knowing how fragile the company had been before I arrived. They were losing clients monthly from service delays. Staff burnout was through the roof, and now? They were running lean, efficient, and scalable, all because of invisible code no one bothered to respect. I was proud of what I built, but a part of me knew. I was also setting myself up for erasure. So, I did something most people in my role would never even consider. I created a contingency, a line of code buried deep in the Flow Core architecture. Not malware, not sabotage, just a failsafe. A digital dead man switch designed to trigger if my access credentials were ever revoked, a single condition. If Jenna Rourke no longer exists in the user database, then Echo Lantern, my codename for the sequence, would begin to quietly disengage key systems one by one. Not instantly, not destructively, just enough to make people wonder where the magic went. I never thought I would have to use it, but I also never thought Brad would fire me without a word of thanks or a moment of hesitation. Turns out, the moment you become invisible, some people forget you are even there at all. That was their mistake, because I was still in the system. And the ghost they created? She was just getting started. The day I got fired started like any other, quiet, productive, and a little too ordinary for comfort. I remember sipping my coffee while running a routine diagnostic on the invoice queue bot. It was clean, No errors. The system was running like silk. I had just cleaned up a redundant cron loop the night before. Everything felt precise, like a symphony where every part knew its role. That morning, Brad Keller messaged me asking if I had a minute to talk in his office. Nothing unusual about that. We usually touched base at least once a week. I thought maybe he wanted to ask about a new client integration, or get help understanding a report he barely read. Instead, he blindsided me. He closed the door behind me, sat down with this overly serious look on his face, and said, "Jenna, we've decided to make a change." I stared at him, waiting for the rest. Then he leaned back in his chair like he was delivering wisdom from a mountaintop and said, "We're letting you go. Honestly, you've made yourself replaceable." Just like that. Replaceable. As if 3 years of saving their operations from drowning in inefficiency could be summed up in one cold word. I wanted to laugh, but I could not find the breath. My ears were ringing from the sheer stupidity of it. I asked him, "Is this about money?" He had the nerve to look uncomfortable. "Well," he said, dragging it out like a coward, "leadership has been reviewing budgets, and, unfortunately, your salary is on the higher end. With so much of the system automated now, it is hard to justify the cost." That was his justification. I was too good at my job. I had streamlined myself out of employment. Not once did he mention that I had built the very automation they now relied on. Not once did he acknowledge that without me, none of it would exist. He talked about me like I was a copy machine they were trading in for something cheaper. I did not argue. I did not beg or list my achievements or throw out numbers to prove my worth. I just nodded, slowly, as if I had been expecting it all along. I smiled, not because I was okay with it, but because I already knew something he did not. Brad had no idea that when I designed FlowCore, the system that now handled nearly every essential function of the company, I built in a tiny silent protocol. One he never bothered to ask about. One that would never show up on a budget report or a user manual. I called it Echo Lantern, and it was about to become the most important piece of code I ever wrote. Echo Lantern was not malicious. I am not that kind of person. It was just smart. It lived quietly inside the FlowCore architecture, checking one thing every day. Was Jenna Rourke still in the system? If the answer ever became no, if my credentials were revoked, if my user ID was deleted, Echo Lantern would wait 72 hours, then begin a slow, quiet rollback of my automation layers. Not all at once. That would be too obvious, too easy to trace. No, this would be subtle. It would start with delays, then small data errors, then lost tickets. It would look like a technical hiccup, maybe a failed update or server misfire. But behind it all would be one undeniable truth. The system only worked when I was part of it. Brad thanked me at the end of that meeting, which was hilarious in itself. He handed me the standard HR folder with information about severance, said something about references, and told me I could take the rest of the day. I left my badge on the desk and walked out without a word. I did not cry. I did not feel defeated. I felt something else entirely. Clarity. That was the moment I realized the difference between being needed and being appreciated. Veridian Nexus needed me more than they ever appreciated me. And now, they were about to learn what it truly meant to lose the architect of their entire foundation. I went home, sat down at my laptop, and opened the terminal one last time. I checked the heartbeat of Echo Lantern. It was still running, still silent, waiting for the final trigger. I closed it without typing a single line. I did not have to. The code was already in motion. My part was done. They thought they had written me off with a line in a spreadsheet. They thought they could delete me from the system without consequence. But Brad made one fatal mistake. He thought replaceable meant powerless. And that was where he was so very wrong. Echo Lantern was never meant to be revenge. It was meant to be insurance. A quiet line of defense in case the people I worked for ever got bold enough or stupid enough to cut me out of the very system I built. When I first started automating Veridian Nexus, it was just me and a backlog of chaotic spreadsheets, redundant processes, and confused managers who barely understood how their own software worked. I cleaned it up, line by line, and built an automation framework that could run without constant oversight. But even as I polished every script and perfected every integration, I kept one little backdoor buried inside a dummy module, a watcher, a single dormant failsafe I called Echo Lantern. It looked like a harmless subroutine. It was buried deep in a folder labeled Legacy Callbacks with fake notes and references to outdated APIs. Nothing that would draw attention. Anyone skimming through it would assume it was leftover scaffolding from an old version of the code. It had no front-end interface, no logs, and no alerts. But what it did have was a heartbeat. Once every 12 hours, Echo Lantern pinged the user directory and checked a single variable. Was my account, Jenna Rourke, still active? If yes, it went back to sleep. If no, it began its quiet task. Echo Lantern was not designed to break anything. It was not a bomb. It was more like a power dial, slowly turning everything down until it stopped making sense. The first thing it would disable were task escalation triggers, those little scripts that tell the system when to bump a client ticket up the chain or when to reassign a task that has been sitting too long. Without that, tickets would stagnate. Customers would wait, then it would target the onboarding scripts, the ones that automatically created user credentials, provision new accounts, and linked them to internal systems. HR would start getting complaints that new hires could not log in, could not get emails, could not access the tools they needed to do their jobs. By the time client log delivery was interrupted, meaning external partners would stop receiving their daily service reports, the company would have no choice but to notice something was very, very wrong. But they would not know why. The logs would look fine. The servers would appear stable. All they would see were strange gaps in data and a creeping sense that the system was not working like it used to. No one would think to check the dummy module hiding in the corner. No one would suspect that the very foundation they trusted had quietly turned against them. I remember packing my box that afternoon. Just a few personal items, a photo of my sister and me from our trip to Vancouver, a ceramic mug I got from a conference, and a notepad I used more for doodling than actual notes. I left my monitor off, left my chair neatly tucked in, and walked out of that office for what I thought would be the last time. No one said goodbye. Brad did not even look up from his phone as I passed, and that was fine. I was not leaving in shame. I was leaving with a plan. The moment my credentials were deactivated, and they were almost immediately after I walked out, Echo Lantern woke up. No fanfare, no flashing lights, just a quiet signal deep in the codebase, triggering a countdown that no one else knew existed. It started disabling one function at a time, methodically and without error. Task escalations were the first to go. Within 24 hours, the help desk would begin to slow. Within 48, onboarding failures would start flooding HR's inbox. And within 72, the first client report delivery would fail. Not permanently, not destructively. Just enough to make someone somewhere ask the most dangerous question you can ask in a company like that. Who built this? It would take them days, maybe weeks, to realize the answer. And by then, they would be neck-deep in confusion, frustration, and mounting pressure from every direction. And all the while, I would be sitting at home, drinking my coffee, watching the storm I had coded come alive, not because I wanted to see them suffer, but because I wanted them to understand. You cannot build your empire on someone's back and then pretend they were never there. You cannot erase the architect and expect the walls to hold. Echo Lantern was not a weapon, it was a message. And now it was speaking loud and clear. At first it was subtle. A few emails went missing and no one paid much attention. Outlook glitches, spam filters, maybe the server hiccuped, that was the easy answer. Then a batch of invoices duplicated themselves and accounting had to scramble to issue corrections. Clients started getting locked out of their portals for no reason. The login system said credentials invalid, even though nothing had changed. Each incident on its own felt small, like a pebble in a shoe. Annoying, sure, but not worth a full-scale investigation. So the team brushed it off and kept moving. By day 4, things got weirder. The executive calendar system, used by the C-suite to manage meetings, deadlines, and investor calls, froze entirely. Brad Keller missed 2 key meetings with high-profile clients because his calendar never alerted him. He blamed his assistant, then IT, and then Microsoft. Marcus, our IT director, ran a patch rollback and blamed it on a recent software update. He said, "We will get it sorted in the next sprint," like that meant anything. No one considered that the problem was not the software at all. It was not a glitch. It was a system deciding quietly to stop cooperating. By day 6, the help desk ticketing queue looked like a disaster zone. New requests were piling up, unresolved tickets were vanishing from the dashboard, and the automated escalation chains I had designed were now completely offline. Customers were calling in angry, demanding explanations. Support reps were manually entering data, which slowed everything down to a crawl. Still, no one knew the real reason. Marcus pulled another all-hands IT meeting and said the system had become temporarily unstable due to overlapping scripts. That was his phrase, temporarily unstable. The truth was, the system was stable. It just was not theirs anymore. By day 7, payroll stopped completely. No one got paid. Not contractors, not staff, not even Marcus. That was the tipping point. Now executives were storming through the office demanding answers. Emails flew, panic set in. HR started pulling timesheets manually, something they had not done in years. A junior accountant tried to restore access to the payroll module, but the integration bot flagged every attempt as invalid authority. No one could override the error. The admin panel looked fine, but every time they tried to process a transaction, the request stalled in a loop and timed out. That was when Marcus finally admitted he was out of ideas. He brought in an external consultant from a managed services firm to audit the infrastructure. The guy showed up, scanned the code, and scratched his head. He said, "The structure is solid, nothing looks corrupted, but it is like parts of the system are asleep." That was the word he used. Asleep. It baffled him. To me, it made perfect sense. Echo Lantern was not meant to explode. It was meant to whisper, to slow things down just enough that everything broke in pieces, not flames. Drip by digital drip. No one linked the collapse to my absence. Not yet. They were too busy trying to fix symptoms instead of looking for the cause. That is the problem with automated systems. When they work, no one notices them. But when they stop working, people only notice the pain, not the architect. Brad, in his usual fashion, went on a rampage blaming junior developers, support techs, and even Marcus himself. He did not once mention my name. I watched it all unfold from home, drinking my coffee with one hand while scrolling through LinkedIn job offers with the other. It was not vindictive. It was quiet justice. The truth is, I could have told them what was happening. I could have pointed to the code and said, "There, that is where you went wrong." But they did not ask. They fired me like I was a line item on a spreadsheet, like my work had no heartbeat. So now, they were dealing with the silence that came after. Not because I wished them harm, but because they refused to understand what I had built for them. And what happens when you shut out the person who knows how to keep the lights on. That week, Veridian Nexus learned something they should have known from the beginning. You do not fire the ghost in the code. You listen to her, or she disappears and takes the whole system with her. By the end of week 2, the place was bleeding internally. Clients were frustrated, employees were working double shifts just to handle what the system used to do in minutes, and no one in IT had a real explanation. That is when Brad decided to make his next brilliant move. In typical Brad Keller fashion, he ignored the people who actually knew how the system worked and reached for the flashiest solution. He hired consultants, a whole team of them. Outsourced techs from a firm called Delta Bridge, supposedly specialists in enterprise restoration. In reality, they were overpaid tech bros with buzzwords and no idea what they were walking into. Brad gave them admin access and a green light to rewrite whatever they needed to stabilize the environment, and boy did they. The first thing they did was rip out 3 of my modular automation triggers because they did not understand what the dependency trees were doing. That move alone created a feedback loop that locked out 30% of users across multiple departments. Then they attempted to streamline the API bridge to payroll. In doing so, they cut off the data pipeline that synced updated employee hours. That triggered false fraud flags in the finance module, and suddenly HR was calling people about discrepancies in their timesheets. The whole system started to choke. Marcus, who had been defending the consultants at first, was now scrambling to isolate each patch they had pushed. But it was like trying to chase lightning through fog. Every time they fixed one problem, 3 more popped up. I was not even trying to sabotage them anymore. They were doing that just fine on their own. Echo Lantern was still running, of course, silently disabling deeper systems, but the damage now had layers. They were throwing water on a burning building without realizing the fire was coming from the wiring, not the walls. Then someone, probably one of the senior developers, started combing through commit logs to trace the original builds. That is when they saw it. My name, over and over. J. Rourke stamped across nearly every core function: escalation logic, credential provisioning, client report workflows, and even their backup job scripts. It was not even hidden, just ignored. I had been the ghost in the code for so long that they had stopped noticing I was there. Until suddenly, I was not. That is when the messages started. My LinkedIn lit up first. Connection requests from people I had never spoken to. A few nervous-sounding messages from former coworkers. Then my inbox started piling up. 6 unread, 9, 12. By the time I hit 22, I started recognizing the names. One from Marcus. One from Sandra, the VP of Ops. Then came the voicemails. And there, right in the middle of them, was the voice I had been expecting. Brad? Hey, Jenna, I hope you're doing well. Listen, if you have time, can we talk? The team could really use your insight. You know, just to help us untangle some things. Insight. That was the word he used. Not brilliance, not ownership, not leadership. Just insight. Like I was some friendly outsider who might offer a suggestion, rather than the one who built the whole damn engine. I sat there for a long moment after listening to that message. My phone screen still glowing, my coffee going cold. It was not rage I felt. It was not even satisfaction. It was clarity. Brad did not value me until he broke everything I made. Now that he needed me, I was suddenly worth calling again. I was no longer too expensive or replaceable. I was vital, indispensable, and he knew it. I could have called him back. I could have agreed to a Zoom meeting, let them grovel, let them try to pretend we were all just collaborators again. But no, not yet. Let them sweat a little longer. Let them keep twisting in the digital wind, looking for answers in logs and patches and scripts they never cared to understand. I had warned them in the way only builders know how, by walking away and letting the structure speak for itself. Brad wanted a quick fix, but I was not a patch. I was the architect, and now they would have to rebuild on my terms. I was not done yet, not by a long shot. Watching them stumble around in the dark, trying to fix what they never took the time to understand, was satisfying, but it was not enough. They had not just fired me. They had dismissed me, diminished me. And then when everything fell apart, they came crawling back, hoping I would quietly clean up their mess. That kind of arrogance deserves an answer, not through sabotage, not through violence, just through the power of truth, served with a little theatrical flair. I started small, a little clip I had saved from last year's holiday party. Someone had filmed Brad after too many cocktails. He was making a toast and joking with the leadership team. Jenna's systems are great and all, but she's such a control freak. You'd think the coffee machine needed a code review before she'd let it run. Everyone laughed. I had smiled that night too, hiding the sting under a polite chuckle. But now, that clip had a different kind of weight. I posted it, just 30 seconds, into the general Slack channel used by my old department. No caption, just the video, followed by a link. The link redirected to the internal company wiki, or at least what used to be the wiki. Now, thanks to a leftover script I had tucked away before leaving, the landing page had been replaced with a looping GIF. A hamster, spinning endlessly in a squeaky wheel. Below it, one sentence in bold, flashing text. Still think this runs itself? Nothing malicious, no code deleted, no data lost, just a reminder, a digital wink, one that spread through the company like wildfire within hours. Then I turned my attention outside the building. Oliver Trent was one of our biggest clients, CEO of a logistics company that relied on Veridian Nexus for live tracking integrations. His team and I had worked closely to streamline their service response times. I sent him a private message, polite, professional. Hi Oliver, I hope you're doing well. Just a heads up, you may see increased latency in your dashboards over the next week. Without the failover balancing script we had in place, your live sync buffers could double under peak load. I attached a small snippet of the old script and a before and after comparison. Just enough truth to plant concern. Nothing exaggerated, just honest, quiet data. The response came within the hour. Are you still involved in support architecture? We were not informed of any changes. This could impact our Q3 reporting. I replied, unfortunately, I am no longer with Veridian Nexus, but I wanted you to be prepared. That was it. Just a simple sentence, but I knew how it would land. When a senior systems architect personally warns you that your infrastructure may fail, you do not ignore it. Especially not someone who had been the backbone of that service since its inception. After that, the ripples started to widen. More clients began asking questions. Some forwarded my message. Others dug into the new ticket backlog and noticed the delays. A few even contacted Marcus directly, asking what had happened to Jenna Rourke's oversight. My name was not just a footnote anymore. It had become part of the conversation. Not because I begged for credit, but because the systems were failing in the exact places I had once made seamless. They had cut me out like dead weight, but now they were realizing I had been the spine. And the beauty of it all? I never touched a single active server. I did not have to. The show was already built. They just never bothered to read the script until the lights started flickering. Brad probably thought I was being petty. Maybe he even cursed me under his breath as he scrambled to contain the fallout. But I was not being petty. I was being precise. I wanted them to see what it meant to underestimate the very thing that held them together. A system is not just code. It is care. It is sweat, vision, testing, and trust. And when you fire the person who understands that, you are not saving money. You are sawing through the floor you are standing on. I gave them a reminder, a quiet little storm, and the best part? The show was only getting started. It had been 2 weeks since the implosion began. 2 weeks since the scripts unraveled, the systems cracked open, and the executives realized they were sitting on a digital time bomb built on ignorance and ego. I had been enjoying the quiet, working from my favorite cafe downtown, a little place with worn brick walls and the scent of cinnamon in the air. I was already halfway into planning my next move, a new startup idea, clean code, clean team, no Brad, no politics, just building again. And then, one Friday morning, I looked up from my screen and saw a familiar face standing at my table. Daphne Langston, CEO of Veridian Nexus. 47 years old, Ivy League, known for her calm under pressure. That morning, though, she looked like she had not slept in days. She was in business attire, but her shoulders sagged beneath the tailored jacket. No assistant, no entourage. Just her, holding a paper cup of whatever the cafe had brewed, staring at me like I was the last person on earth who could help her. "Do you mind if I sit?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I gestured to the seat across from me and closed my laptop. She sat down slowly, as if she had rehearsed this moment, and still did not know what to say. I waited, sipping my coffee. I was not going to make this easy. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "The board wants me to fix it, and I think only you can." I stared at her for a moment. No apology, no admission of what kind of mistake, just a vague gesture towards some abstract fix, as if I were a patch she could install. "Does Brad agree?" I asked. That was the moment everything shifted. She hesitated, just a beat too long. Her eyes flicked to the table, then back to mine. She did not answer. That silence told me everything I needed. Brad had not agreed. Brad was probably still fighting it, still clinging to the fantasy that his consultants could salvage something. Or maybe he was scrambling to save his own title, now that the board was breathing down their necks. Either way, the fact that Daphne was sitting here meant he had lost control of the narrative. And now, she was here to ask the one person they had thrown out to clean up the bloodstains. "You let him walk me out with a security badge and a cardboard box," I said. "You signed the termination order." "I did," she admitted, "and it was a terrible call. I trusted the wrong person. I let that hang in the air." The noise of espresso machines and clinking mugs filled the silence between us. For a woman who once ran quarterly reviews like a military general, Daphne looked oddly small just then. Not weak, just exposed. I wondered if she had ever had to beg for anything in her life before this moment. "We lost Trent Logistics," she added, "and Henderson Group froze their contract until we stabilized the service tier. So Oliver had made his move. I was not surprised. When clients start losing trust in your architecture, money follows. That was the language these people finally understood. Not pride, not logic, just contracts and zeros. You came all this way, I said, leaning back. Why? Because I know we cannot rebuild without you. Not just the code, but the trust. You know the systems better than anyone, and honestly, the board does not believe we can move forward unless we prove we have you back on our side. She meant that literally. I had become part of their shareholder optics now, not just a talent, a symbol. And that, strangely enough, felt like justice, because I had never asked for a spotlight. I just wanted to build. But now that they had thrown me out and burned the foundation, I held the power. The blueprint lived in my head, and if they wanted it back, it would come with conditions. I will think about it, I said, sipping my coffee again. But if I come back, it is not as a fixer. Her eyes narrowed slightly, curious. It is as an equal, I added. And Brad? He will answer to someone for once, starting with me. She nodded slowly, not in resistance, but in understanding. Fair, she said quietly. Fair, funny word coming from a company that once called me disposable. But now? The CEO was sitting in a neighborhood cafe asking for my forgiveness while her empire bled out in silence behind her. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just closed my laptop and said, "You know how to reach me." And just like that, she left, still holding the empty cup, still carrying the weight of everything she had ignored. I sat there for a long time after that, not thinking about revenge, not even about redemption, just about what kind of empire I might build next, with my name on the door this time. I did not drag it out. I had been thinking about it from the moment I saw Daphne walk through that cafe door. For all their scrambling, I knew they would come to me eventually, and when they did, I would not waste the moment on vague promises or flattering titles. I wanted clarity, control, and most of all, proof that I was never going to be erased again. So the next morning, I drafted my terms and sent them directly to Daphne's personal inbox. I did not dress it up in corporate fluff. I kept it clean, direct, and absolute. The subject line read, "Conditions for return." Inside, I laid out everything I expected. First, a formal written apology from Daphne, signed and submitted to the board of directors, admitting the mishandling of my termination and acknowledging the role my systems played in sustaining the company. No vague language, no miscommunications or unfortunate misunderstandings. A real apology. Second, I wanted full administrative access to every system I had built or touched, permanent, unrestricted, and documented. No shadow IT handoffs, no stripped credentials. If they wanted me back, they were giving me the keys to the kingdom. Third, Brad Keller was to be demoted, effective immediately. I did not care where they sent him. Audits, vendor relations, the mailroom. He just was not allowed anywhere near the operations or tech stack again. The man who fired me for being too efficient was not going to benefit from my return. Fourth, I wanted Lila Kim promoted to head of the operations team, reporting directly to me. She was smart, organized, and had stuck her neck out for me more than once. It was time she had a shot at building something of her own, with real authority. And finally, I wanted my name in every single build release from that point forward. No more ghost in the code. No more commits under anonymous handles or generic team tags. I was not just returning as a systems architect, I was returning as the architect, period. I stared at the list for a few minutes before hitting send. Part of me expected pushback. These were not small asks. I was basically demanding a restructure. But when you are the one holding the foundation together, you stop asking for permission. You make the rules. Less than 4 hours later, Daphne replied. She said, I blinked, then I nodded. That was her whole response. No questions, no counteroffers, just an admission that the demands were fair and necessary. An hour after that, her assistant forwarded me a PDF, an official company memo signed by Daphne and 3 members of the board. The apology was clean, direct, and exactly what I had asked for. It stated in plain terms that my termination had been premature, that my automation infrastructure had saved the company millions annually, and that my value had been misjudged due to a failure in leadership, specifically Brad's. The second document granted me top-tier administrative access to every system I had previously touched, plus audit rights over any external vendors brought in during my absence. There was even a clause stating that any attempt to modify or revoke my access would trigger a security review involving the board. It was, in effect, a protective shell around my work. And then came the most satisfying part, Brad's demotion. The memo was short and cold. It announced that Brad Keller was being reassigned to a strategic compliance role outside of the IT and operations departments. Translation? He was benched, permanently. No power, no team, no say. Lila's promotion came next. She sent me a message right after the announcement went live. "Did you do this? Because I am crying at my desk right now." I replied, "No, we did this." By the end of the day, my name appeared in the release notes for version 9.2 of the Veridian backend suite. It was in bold, followed by the words, "Lead system architect and partner," not employee, not contractor, partner. They could have chosen anyone to rebuild their systems, but they had chosen the woman they once threw out like a line item on a spreadsheet. And now, every time a new feature went live, every time a system purred without crashing, it would carry my name, loud, clear, and untouchable. That night, I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the city move beneath me. It was not about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the rules. And this time, I had carved my initials into every single one. I walked back into Veridian Nexus on a Monday morning, not as the woman they fired, but as the architect they could not replace. The badge they handed me had a new title printed beneath my name: Co-Architect, Partner. No HR welcome packet, no onboarding. I was not here to fit into the old machine. I was here to design a new one. The office looked almost the same, but I did not. I felt like someone who had walked through fire and come out sharp, unshakable, and ready to lead from the ground up. The first thing I did was wipe the last 6 months of patchwork spaghetti code from the mainframe. It was a disaster of half-baked rewrites, duct-taped automations, and outsourced guesses. The consultants Brad hired had made everything worse. Entire subsystems were held together by single scripts, ones they could not even explain, so I tore it down, brick by digital brick. I did not patch, I rebuilt. And what we created was something we named vStream, a resilient, intelligent automation ecosystem that could survive any one person leaving, including me. But this time, I did it differently. I trained my team to understand every piece of what they were building. We documented everything. We created living knowledge bases, shared dashboards, and feedback loops. No more mystery code, no more silos. I taught them not just how the systems worked, but why they were built the way they were. We made our work transparent, repeatable, and proud. Every team member left a digital signature on their contributions. No ghosts, no anonymous fixes, no hidden geniuses quietly saving the day from behind the curtain. Lila Kim, my former intern and now the head of operations under me, took to the role like she was born for it. She built her own squad from the ground up, diverse, smart, fast learners. She handled most of the day-to-day infrastructure deployments, while I focused on high-level architecture and strategic design. Watching her grow into that leadership space reminded me why I fought so hard to come back on my terms. I did not want to just win. I wanted to change something. And I did. I deleted Echo Lantern. That hidden kill switch, the one I embedded so long ago, quietly humming behind everything, was gone. Not because I no longer could use it, but because I no longer needed it. I wanted no part of secrecy or sabotage anymore. What I built now was built to last beyond me. No booby traps, no revenge code, just clean, honest engineering, the kind that did not punish people for leaving but made it easier for those who stayed to keep going strong. Daphne checked in a few times that first month, but mostly she let me lead. I think she realized she was lucky I came back at all. Brad, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen. I had heard he was reassigned to internal compliance, buried under auditing reports in some dim cubicle far from ops. I did not feel smug about it. I did not feel anything, really. I had bigger things to build. Clients returned. Some who had paused contracts during the chaos reactivated their accounts once they heard I was back. Others came in through word of mouth, stories of a team that had rebuilt an entire digital backbone in weeks with near zero downtime. We were not just fixing broken systems. We were reimagining how operations could work across the industry. Transparent, agile, and accountable. There was a moment, one afternoon around week 10, when I stood at the center of the operations floor, listening to my teamwork. I was not giving orders. They did not need them. I was just watching. And in that quiet buzz of confidence and collaboration, I realized something. I was never just building systems, I was building culture. And this time, it had my name right there in the blueprint. About 6 months after I rebuilt Veridian's backbone, I got a call while making tea in my apartment on a rainy Tuesday morning. The caller ID said unknown, but I answered anyway. A recruiter, polite, enthusiastic, trying too hard not to sound too impressed. He asked if I happened to know who had designed and implemented the new vStream automation engine that Veridian Nexus had been using. Said his firm was working with a major logistics network, and they had heard rumors about an internal transformation so seamless it practically ran itself. I smiled and let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Have you checked the footer of the system console?" He paused. I could almost hear the click of his mouse as he checked something on his end. Then, like clockwork, he read it aloud. Automation engine by Jenna Rourke, systems architect and partner, Veridian Nexus. Another pause. Then he laughed. "So that is you." That was the point. For the first time in my career, my work did not need an introduction. It was not hidden behind a dozen vague changelogs or tucked into anonymous Git commits. I was done ghostwriting genius. I had spent too many years letting managers like Brad Keller take credit for my systems or dismiss them as technical stuff while padding their own reviews. Now, my name was built into every layer of the architecture. Clear, unambiguous, and permanent. It was not about the credit exactly. It was about the record, about making sure that when someone used what I built, they knew who had imagined it, who had written it, tested it, cleaned up the bugs, and made it stable enough to become the foundation for a modern enterprise. There is a different kind of power in being seen after being underestimated for so long. The recruiter asked if I would be open to talking more, said the company was prepared to offer full creative control, a founding architect title, stock options, remote-first flexibility, the whole package. I thanked him, said I would think about it, and meant it. But I was not in a rush to leave. Not because I owed Veridian anything, but because I still had more to build. I had a team that trusted me. I had interns becoming leads. I had ideas that had not yet made it to code. That kind of environment is rare. You do not walk away from it just because another door opens. I thought back to the day I had been fired. Brad's voice still rang in my head sometimes, sharp and stupid. "Honestly, you made yourself replaceable." I wondered where he was now. I had heard from someone in compliance that he was managing spreadsheet audits for procurement, a desk surrounded by gray walls and silence. There was no kill switch left to trigger, no need for one. His career undid itself the moment he decided I was expendable. I did not have to lift a finger. People still occasionally reached out to me through LinkedIn, asking how I had done it, how I had made the leap from quiet engineer to partner. I told them the truth. You stop building in the shadows. You start putting your name where it belongs. You set boundaries. You document everything. You let your code speak, yes, but you also learn to speak for yourself. Daphne, to her credit, kept every part of the Jenna clause in place. My admin credentials stayed untouched. My release notes bore my full name. Even our board updates started with a simple header, prepared by Jenna Rourke. It was strange how easy it was once I had the leverage to demand it. I realized the system was never designed to notice people like me, so I redesigned the system. One Friday night, after pushing a final update for the quarter, I sat at my desk, staring at the terminal. I typed a short test command and watched the logs scroll perfectly. Everything ran smooth, clean, fast, under control. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and smiled. Funny how visible your name becomes once you stop letting people overlook you.